Hi, it's Maria, and I'm doing another Forgiveness to Love video. And this is number 21 of My Life Exposed. And the subtitle is page 4 of my forgiveness list. And so it's about Phoenix to Ashland, a spiritual mentor, and a Greyhound bus injury. And so Martin Luther King reminds us over and over that hatred breeds hatred and only love can win, right? I think that's just so beautiful. Yet so many human beings on the planet act in such savage ways to hurt others. And so all you have to do is just turn on the news and hear the stories of how disgustingly people behave and how vicious they can be and how hurtful and vengeful people can be. And so it's a form of savagery, I think. And so anyway, one of my father's most sage pieces of advice was, no matter how much money he could leave me, the only true fortune I had was between my ears. And, I used to go, right, Daddy, right. But, perhaps that's why I learned to study. I learned and I studied so much. I was kind of a nerd. And so I was kind of the quintessential student because I loved learning so much. But I think it really had a lot to do with my father telling me that nothing else in the world mattered other than what we know in our mind, whether it's spirituality or whether it's art or whether it's physics or chemistry or anatomy. It doesn't, or law. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just that is a part of us that no one can strip us of. And so when I would meet a man, what would really turn me on was his brain, how smart he was, and his intellect. And I would be just mesmerized, and I'd listen to every word. If someone were truly, truly an intellectual, I just loved hearing them speak about all different subjects, and I just felt like I was like a sponge because I would just absorb it all. I loved it. Anyway, this must go back to my childhood, which I had an uncle, my mother's brother, Uncle George, and he was my favorite, and he was a mathematical genius and my first true love. You know how some little girls want to marry their daddy and they idolize their fathers. Well, of course, I loved my father, but my Uncle George was really special to me. And so he was a math professor at Notre Dame, and he had that disheveled professorial look. He had kind of straight, long black hair that fell in his eyes a lot. And he had, big horn-rimmed glasses. And he had, the biggest smile. And he was always happy and laughing. And he had a little tummy. And he was just a brain because he knew the answer to every question I had for him. And so, it's interesting how haters will go so far as to try to devalue and destroy what we love most in this world. And I think that people are acting out now more than in the past. And because people have said randomly that they feel like there's just so much darkness. And yet, the darkness, I think, has always been there. And yet, I think what's happening is that people are uncovering it within themselves and within others because so many emotions have been suppressed. And so now people are just feeling with abandon that they can really express themselves and rage and do whatever kind of crazy behaviors that they want to exhibit. And so anyway, for me, it was very strange that my uncle, who was such a brain, ended up being brain dead. And that was due to iatrogenic error. And that just means that it's a physician error, right? And his I think it was his cardiologist actually had just changed his medication, and it was an error. He either gave too low a dose or too high a dose or something, or omitted something. In any event, my uncle that night after dinner, I guess, while sitting at the dinner table, had an event, a cardiac issue, and and then they ambulanced him to the hospital. And actually, they waited until I got there. I was living in the North Shore suburbs of Chicago, and he lived in South Bend, so it took me a couple of hours. But they actually waited for me to come before they disabled life support, or at least that's what I was told. And so anyway, and it's a iatrogenic error, which many deaths actually are due to iatrogenic errors in medication, wrong prescriptions, and things like that. And the word iatros is a Greek word, and it means physician, it means doctor. And so it's a iatrogenic error, which means it's a physician, an error caused by a physician. And so, I thought that was very strange because the timing was very weird. It was in the middle of my divorce when things were really heating up, and he was my rock, and he was my best friend. And this was during the time when I needed him the most. And so it wasn't until a little while ago when I started to think about things that had been in my subconscious for a long time. But again, they had been suppressed because I think the energy of the earth was such that humanity was suppressing so much. And that's why now these emotions are bubbling up, and these memories and these thoughts and these revelations are coming to the surface. And that's why people are kind of going off the rails, because they can't even handle the energy. It is so strong. And so I was just starting to put together some of the pieces of the puzzles for my life, and hopefully to be an example where you can do the same for yourself. And so when you realize that my Uncle George, like my Nana, I felt like maybe they had actually been sacrificed. And I think I carried around that guilt for a long time because it happened during my divorce, during the worst time. And both of them seemed to have unnecessarily died. And so I wasn't blaming myself, yet at the same time, they loved me so, and I loved them so, and I was their favorite, and they were my favorite. And and then they died. And the timing was weird because we hadn't had a death in our family for many years before or since. And so in terms of, older relatives or whatever, other than my parents, of course. But, it was just, the darkness knows where to attack us. And that is where we are most vulnerable. And so, for instance, in my divorce, when the ex wanted to fight about everything, he said, if you leave, I'm going to take everything from you. And so I said, well, go, take it. If you want the house, take the house. If you want the money, take the money. But there's only one thing that I want, and that is my children. And so what do you think his response to that was? Can you guess? Well, if that's what you want, then that's what I'm going to go after. And so you see, that's how many human beings on the planet think, and especially in adversarial situations, like in divorce court, in family law. And so there's no point in negotiating or mediating or any type of civilized discussion because the focus isn't on anything other than overpowering an opponent. And, when I had told my attorneys that, I said, give them everything. I just want my children. Because I knew that my father had said, don't worry about anything financial. I can help you with that. So just just extricate yourself as soon as you can, because it's a very unhealthy situation. And so that was really my focus. Um, but what was I going to say? Oh, my attorney said, well, don't tell him you want the children. Just tell him that you're going to go to Maui with a lover and just go live happily ever after there. And my attorney said, oh, he'll throw the children at you. And yet I said, oh, I'm not going to even risk that one, though. But in any event, the goal is to make you pay, right? Because unless you are following orders, or unless you're doing exactly what people want, they do want to make you pay. And so I don't know if many of you remember, but in the after the defamation trial, the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times had my big picture on it, and it said the headlines were "She Must Pay." And so I thought that was kind of very fitting that in a defamation trial I was the one that was defamed, but in any event, that's just how it is, how it was. And so the words up at the top were "She must pay." And so they want to get you where it hurt. And for me, it was my reputation, because there was nothing about that trial that was real from my perspective. And so, and that headline came out on Saturday, because the verdict was on Friday. And so the headline was on Saturday morning. And that was my oldest son's birthday. And it was October 7th, 2006. And so he saw that, and it basically destroyed him as well, to see his mother being destroyed that way. But that's what the dark does. They like to ruin our holidays and even our children. But back to my father saying that my fortune is in my mind and no one could take that from me, I realized that is exactly what the dark was focused on taking from me. And so they want to play twisted mind games to kind of torture us. And so they actually were responsible for a very serious traumatic brain injury that I sustained actually 3 years ago now. It was June 5th, 2019. And I've told you, I don't know if I've really talked about it much, because, this is the 21st video, and I can't remember what was in video number 19, or what was in video number 6. But if I haven't, I apologize ahead of time. And you'll see that sometimes if I lose my train of thought, I just want you to know that I am still healing from the effects of a very serious brain injury. And so you'll see what I mean when if for all of a sudden, kind of it just goes blank. So I do apologize ahead of time. But I have made amazing progress. And after the brain injury, truly, I was a mess. But you'll see in this video series, we are really putting into practice what the entire video series is about, which is about forgiveness to love. And so, 3 years ago, in 2019, it was 2019, I attempted to leave Arizona to go to Oregon to study with a spiritual teacher. And I needed to take suitcases with me because all my belongings were in them. And I did have a storage unit, but someone had broken into my storage unit, and you can guess who that was. And they took my props and my costumes and my wigs and my stuffed animal characters and all of the fun stuff that I have on my website, mariahaiti.com. And where I do all the videos talking to my imaginary friends, the animals, the stuffed animals. And it was just so much fun. I just loved making those videos. And so but I had these suitcases and I didn't have any place to put them. And so what I decided to do was to send them on a bus. And unbeknownst to me, I had to buy a ticket and ride with them. And I guess 3 suitcases went under the bus, and then I could ship five other suitcases on another bus. In any event, I bought a ticket and I rode with them. And so I boarded this massive Greyhound bus in Phoenix, Arizona. And the first stop was a restroom break in Blythe, California. And there was a restroom break, and so there was a line to get back on the bus. And it was very weird because suddenly the bus driver, I was standing in line and there were people in front of me and people behind me. And once I got up to the door where I was about to step on the step in order to get on the bus driver caught right in front of me. And when it was my turn. And so he got on the bus and then I then followed him. And suddenly, and I can't remember if I had actually put my foot on the step and I was kind of, ready to board, or if I was just about to put my foot on the step. And suddenly, out of nowhere, I was literally knocked out. And this huge, massive steel bus door on the right side of me, it was on the right, just slammed into my face and my head with such force that it literally threw me against the left side of the bus. I mean, the left side of my head hit the side of the bus. And so my entire body hit the steel bus. And I collapsed. And the next thing I remember was someone yelling, "Call an ambulance." And they were pulling me up off the cement in a way that actually, I realized later, could have caused even more injuries. But I just didn't know what hit me. It was just like out of nowhere, literally. And so I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even know where I was. I just thought, oh my God, I'm all alone. I need help. Everything hurts. What's going to happen to me? And so I didn't want to get in an ambulance, and I didn't want to go to a hospital where I didn't know anyone. And if they said, "Oh, you need brain surgery," well, I didn't know how I was going to handle that, and anyway, I was really kind of, I wasn't thinking clearly either, but at the same time, I had no idea because I had no idea about what was happening, and everything hurt. So I couldn't even focus. I couldn't speak, actually, even to tell anyone what was hurting. So I just said, just get me to Oregon, where I knew one person was waiting for me. And I was in so much pain after a few hours that actually by the time we went up the state to Sacramento, I said, you know what? I'm in too much pain. Ambulance me to the ER. And I didn't have medical coverage, and all I could think of was I just needed to get to Oregon to get some help. And so imagine, I just ached everywhere, and my head was throbbing, and it was like in a box. It was almost like, and this is something important to know because so many people do have massive head injuries, whether they're playing sports, whether it's football, whether it's soccer, whether it's hockey, whether it's an automobile accident. Head injuries are not all that uncommon, actually. And so, of course, some are of greater severity than others, but at the same time, it was as if I was wearing the most massive, thickest, heaviest earmuffs or headphones in the whole world. And it was like, on Halloween, when some of the costumes are people will wear a box over their head, and I don't know if they'll be like a television, or I don't know, I don't remember or it's just a face, a square or rectangular head. But I was like in the twilight zone, and I felt like my head was in a box, really. And so I couldn't bear anyone talking to me, and I needed total silence and darkness. And here I was headed to a new place, and I had to depend on one person for my survival because my body was bruised. I had a serious concussion. I could barely talk. I was stuttering, and I couldn't even remember words. And so, what I wanted to say was, all I want is quiet. Don't talk. Turn off the lights and just leave me alone. Let me sit for like a month in a dark room. That's really what I felt like. And so it was quite the predicament because finally, I met a couple people, and a man offered me a cushioned corner in a bedroom so that I could just stay quiet and just sleep. Um, and so a little while later, I had met more people, and one offered me a place in his apartment, and he was very kind because I was able to just keep the lights off where I was, and just have silence. And so, but I couldn't even fathom how it happened or much less why it happened, right? But slowly things began to make sense. And I realized that for me, in terms of my understanding of the event, was that it was really no accident. And especially when I arrived in Oregon and I asked for help getting my luggage because another employee heard me and volunteered to help. And he explained that the bus driver is in control of the door once he steps inside, right? And so he urged me to follow up with this because, and then I also heard that weeks later, I heard weeks later that day that I had arrived in Medford, Oregon, the woman who owned the Greyhound franchise, where I was to pick up my luggage, that days later arrived, and it was unlocked and ripped. But days later, she said I ran around saying, I'm going to sue, I'm going to sue. And that was just such a lie. I just shook my head when I heard that because it just confirmed to me that, there were many people involved, shall I say that. And so this was she was like a setup in the wings. And, I've talked about the flying monkeys that the dark has to kind of throw us off our course and to kind of defame us and discredit us. Well, that's exactly what I felt. Here I was, I was so injured and everything, and I could barely even find my luggage, and it didn't come until days later. I had to go back, and then it was all a mess anyway. But here I was waiting for my friend to come and pick me up, and this woman is suggesting that I was so insane that I would be running around saying I'm going to sue. I mean, that's just crazy. But you know what? It's kind of like when we notice this in many situations in our lives. If you think hard about what happens when there is an event, what happens is it's almost like, if you can visualize, there's one person who creates the event, who hurts someone, who does some evil deed or whatever, and then all of a sudden he leaves, and the people there are injured and whatever, and then he goes and hides behind a building or hides behind a wall or whatever and throws a grenade. And so what happens is he just watches everybody just hysterical while he's just sitting there laughing, watching everyone worry about all this other stuff. And meanwhile, the crime that he committed is people aren't even paying attention to that. So he shifts the focus of he shifts the focus such that there is such distraction that the real crimes aren't even considered. So anyway, I'm sure I was screaming lawsuit in the middle of this tremendous brain injury. Anyway, all I wanted to do was to get to Oregon, and I just couldn't even imagine that there were flying monkeys already set up to start spreading rumors about me. But anyway, it was very strange. And I also found it very strange that the bus driver was actually yelling at one of the passengers that was sitting in the last row and made him get off the bus. He was blaming him for something. And again, I couldn't even pay attention. I just wanted quiet. But I do remember that actually the bus driver was yelling at somebody as if that guy was closing the door. I don't really know exactly what happened, but he made him get off the bus, and the guy had to wait another half hour or hour or whatever um, until the next bus came. But I just saw a lot of really crazy behavior during this ridiculous and very tragic event, actually. Um, but there have been so many problems and misfortunes over the last few decades in many of our lives, um, that sometimes we realize that accidents aren't really accidents. And so that's a lot of what is really coming up now, because maybe if we were in a car accident or whatever, or, this bus accident, but we might say, oh, it was just happened. And a lot of times, yes, things do happen. And yet now what we're learning with this energy is that things are not being swept under the rug anymore, and that we are really seeing the masks have fallen off, and we are really seeing the people. And as I said in a couple of videos back, Oprah has said that, in fact, when someone shows you who they really are, like, pay attention the first time. And so that's what that's what I think this is all about, is that finally, we've made excuses for people for a long time, and we've sacrificed ourselves when we do that. And yet we can't do that anymore, because now our eyes are open and we are seeing people for who they are and how disrespectful they are to us. We can't make any more excuses for them. And so it's up to us to decide, are we going to sacrifice ourselves? This is the point in time when it's all about self-love. And so when we value ourselves, we are not going to allow others to infringe upon us, to disrespect us, to be disloyal, to betray us. We see that the first time, and then it's time to just unconditionally love them from afar, right? And forgive them, because this is about forgiveness to love, and that's what the series is all about. It's about forgiving, but forgiving is not how many of us thought, including myself. Forgiving is like, oh, I love you, I forgive you, everything's going to be hunky-dory, everything's going to be just peachy. No, that's not how it is. It's, I forgive you. I understand that your wounds allowed you or propelled you or motivated you or compelled you to behave that way toward me, to disrespect me. And so I understand that that's just who you are. And so I release you, because I do not appreciate that in my life. I will not tolerate that. I have put up my boundaries, and these are them, right? And so that's really what it's about. That many people have been plotting against us, and we didn't even know it. And for even when we have a job situation, we might think it's a disgruntled coworker or a disgruntled customer or whatever. But you know what? Maybe it was our competition who actually paid that guy to come and create all kinds of havoc for us. I mean, I know this sounds far-fetched. I am just taking note that many of us are seeing others in a way that we had refused to see them in that way. For instance, if our spouse was stealing from us, our spouse was hiding money from us, or our spouse was cheating on us, we didn't see that necessarily before. And yet now all of a sudden, we're seeing it. And truly, I didn't see much of what was going on in my family for many years. And then I thought about it even when I just wasn't sure why my sibling, had stolen everything from me. And then I would write her and I'd say, well, you're an executor of an estate. We had been co-executors, but you're the executor now. And so I need you to communicate with me because I am a co-beneficiary of our parents' trust, of our parents' estate, entire estate, the fortune that we were to split 50-50. And yet, I never heard back from her ever. And that was even in 2015 is when I understand there was distribution. But I have written her and I tried to find her and even went to her home and found her husband, but but she's refused. And so yeah, we don't want to see that, and we think, oh well, maybe they just like when people don't do things that they are supposed to do, we think, oh maybe they forgot it or whatever. But the latest act of violence. Which was, I believe, to get rid of me, for sure. I had to see that she was very wounded. Otherwise, she would not have, no one would have orchestrated a brain injury. And, nothing about that brain injury made sense to me. And so, we can deny it and we can say, oh, yes, it was just an accident. And yet the puzzle pieces don't fit. When they do fit, then we see things very clearly. And so, and then, I had also heard that she was involved in black magic and voodoo and witchcraft and crazy things like that. And I just couldn't even imagine what her physician husband thought about that. But, I'm reminded of my father's warning to my mother when my sibling, was 12 or 13, that he felt she needed some psychiatric help. And yet, he didn't pursue it because he was in a medical clinic with 55 physicians, and he really didn't want his physician partners to know that there was anything going on in our family. My dad was a very private person, as many of our parents are, and as we are, actually. And so, he didn't pursue that. He didn't want people involved in our family business. And so the lesson here, again, this is about the truth coming out. And so the lesson here may be to note that don't worry what anyone else thinks. Do what is in your best interest and in the best interest of your family. And so when a family member shows signs of aberrant behavior, then it's not to be swept under the rug. They need help. And it's as if, mental illness is the same as another illness. If you saw your child in need of medical intervention, of course you would take them and have them seen and diagnosed and treated. And so that's the same thing, because had my father really addressed the problem in the manner in which it should have been addressed, in order for everyone's well-being, for everyone's health, maybe because again, from my perspective, she was responsible for the deaths of both of my parents. And so if in fact he had gotten her the help she needed, perhaps he would still be here. I mean, we just never know. I am just saying these things that I believe, and you can take them or not take them, or believe them or not believe them. It doesn't matter. I live by my truth. And so I am just pleading with you to, when you see a problem in your family, please get them help, whether it's someone who is suicidal or someone who's manic depressive or someone who's bipolar or someone who's schizophrenic or whatever, or someone who is addicted, who has addictions. Get them the help they need, because there are so many people on the planet right now who are suffering, and they really need help. And so let's reach out and see what we can do. And so anyway, in terms of, again, why I think this whole brain injury was very suspicious, it's, there was more devilry involved. and including the fact that the doctor's notes and the medical records, hid the real injury. The traumatic brain injury, the severe concussion, the body bruises, and later I needed a neurological assessment um, of the post-concussive syndrome, which I was dealing with. I was also dealing with verbal hydrocephalus because I was stuttering and I couldn't reach the word I needed in order to speak. And I saw the medical records at one point, and the injuries were all either edited out or never put in to begin with in my files anywhere. And so I needed a neuropsychological exam, and I never had that. I needed rehab. I needed speech therapy. I never got any of that. There was no follow-up. And, it was almost as if the injury was being kept as a big secret so that I'd suffer alone. And, well, not really alone, as I've said, because I always had those stalkers watching me and listening and sabotaging my food and my health. And so I have to say about the events in our lives that are finally being revealed. And so as I think about other things in my life as well, I am just amazed that I was just so oblivious to so much of what was going on. And, because we have busy lives and we just think, oh, well, that happened. Okay, let's move on from it. But really, why did that happen? How did that happen? Who was involved? And because it's not a matter of just dissecting it to death, it's a matter of becoming aware so that you can prevent it from happening again, so that you can see the patterns, so that we can gain our strength, and so that we can become the empowered humans that we are meant to be, the divine human beings that we are. And so, we do need extra strength during this time, and you've got it. Yes. And so let's now go to part 22. And remember, I'm here for you, and I